Hello, my name is Oliver Chin. I'm the publisher of Immedium. We're a San Francisco children's book publisher of multicultural stories, and I'm happy to share some of them today with you at CABE. We'll be talking about the series from Ying Compestine, which we published a couple years ago. It's the Story of series, Amazing Chinese Inventions. They cover noodles, chopsticks, kites, and paper, as well as her fifth book, which is also bilingual and simplified Chinese, Boy Dumplings, A Tasty Chinese Tale. So we'll be giving a couple minutes to each of the five books. As you can tell, we color-coded the series on the Chinese inventions to make them easily recognizable. These were actually reprints that we redesigned, and we added the simplified Chinese translation to give it a bigger bang for the buck as we visit a lot of Chinese immersion programs and language programs in elementary schools. We've gotten a lot of feedback, but there's not enough material for the reading levels in Chinese. So even though in English our books are normally leveled around second or third grade, kids in those grades actually read at a lower level just because there's less Chinese language material for them to get their hands on. So that's one of the main motivations that we've had to do a lot more bilingual books than we've done in the past. And now for the 50 titles that we have published, more than a quarter have been bilingual. So I'm going to do a quick screen share and just show you a little bit more about the author. This is Ying. Ying Compestine. She lives in the East Bay in the Bay Area, and she's been an award-winning author of children's books, spanning picture books to young adult, as well as being active in other parts of life, such as cooking. So we're going to do a quick screen share of the first book, which is the story of Chopsticks. So the four stories in the series all feature these three brothers. They're the Chang brothers, and as kids they are curious, and they get their hands in a lot of different pots. And the main theme is that because they do have a tendency of getting into trouble, they have to use their quick wits to invent things which will get them out of hot water, literally. So each of these stories is about a particular invention, but it's how these three brothers came to create them in a very fun and pithy way, which is kind of true to the spirit of how inventors are. So in the back, there's an author's note which talks about the actual historical record of how these inventions came to be. But as far as the story goes, it's kind of a fun fictional take on a historical object. So we'll just give you a couple quick pages of this. So each book was redesigned according to the theme, and we edited the English to make room for the Chinese. So the illustrator, Yang Zhang, he's actually born in China, as was the author, and he went to art school there and learned the traditional art of colored paper cutting. So these are all illustrations of colored paper, which he hand cut, and they look like woodcuts, which have been colored, but they're actually colored paper. So we have the English at the top, followed by the Chinese, and this sets the scene of the family who's enjoying a meal. And as luck would have it, the parents have to go out and do some work. And then one of the kids come back, and because he is a little bit too eager and a little bit too hungry, he decides to eat some very hot food. But at the time, he could only find a stick to poke it with. And then he learns that he can actually use two sticks, and his family follows suit. And they found that using two sticks enables them to eat really hot food without burning themselves. And so this innovation, by using sticks of twigs or other things handy, enabled them to enjoy their food in a different way. So the traditional colored paper cuttings really bring the story to life in a way which seems both traditional, but also in a style which most readers aren't really familiar with and haven't seen before. And so it gives it a definite sense of fantasy to it as well. So we're just going to go toward the end of the book as their invention becomes popular and they share it with the community at large. And eventually it gets the AOK from the community powers that be. So here we have the author's note and some quick handy tips on how to use chopsticks for those of you who aren't initiated. And then we also translated this into Chinese. So the author worked very closely with the translator to make sure that not only was it accurate in terms of representation, but also according to the literary figures of speech which she used. And then in the back, she includes a recipe for a dish which people could enjoy with chopsticks. So we're going to stop this screen share for the time being, and then we're going to head over to the next book, which is The Story of Noodles. So here we go. And again, we see our brothers in action again. And in this case, they're using chopsticks to eat noodles, which is pretty appropriate. So this follows the similar arc of the three brothers who get into a little bit of hot water and then have to come up with a fine invention. So maybe I'll just read a little bit about it. So that's their mother. She says, "Stop playing with your food, boys," scolded Mama Kang. "Remember, a farmer had to sweat for every grain of rice. Pick them all up." The three Kang boys, Pan, Ting, and Kwai, cleaned up the rice from the floor. Then they started cleaning each other up. "Oh, Pan," Ting exclaimed, "you have rice in your hair." "Oh, no," Ting Pan answered, "you have rice in your ears." "Oh, oh, oh," Ting and Pan Kwai laughed, "you have rice in your toes." As people who have siblings know, that's often a call to further mayhem. So there they are, relaxing, and then their parents, again, leave them alone for some reason, but the mother, is known for being a good cook, but then the boys get their hands on her dough, and dough means trouble, so naturally a food fight ensues, and noodles get spun out everywhere. Of course, the boys don't realize they're noodles until they put them into hot water and eat them fully cooked. And with the parents coming back home, they realize that the boys have made a mess, but also have invented a new type of food. So again, we balance out the Chinese with the English. And as the artist Yang Shengzuan created very distinct and unique illustrations sometimes, which covered spreads. On some pages, we combined them. All right, so moving forward, again, we get an author's note about how noodles originated. Thanks to Marco Polo, who brought them to the West and made them into spaghetti and things like that. And then as a cook herself, the author contributes her own recipe for long life noodles, which are commonly eaten during the new year because the long noodles, which aren't cut, symbolize long life. All right, so we're going to head on to the next book, which is The Story of Kites. So when the author first published these books, they came out year after year after year, but for us, we republished them all simultaneously so that people can enjoy the entire series at the same time. So this one's color-coded blue in honor of the sky that the kites fly in. In this agricultural life, the kids have to help out in the fields, and because they're harvesting grain, they have to shoo away birds, which naturally are attracted to the seeds. And the boys figure out that running around and chasing birds takes a lot of effort. There must be an easier way for them to get the job done. So they figure out that maybe if they acted like birds themselves, they could actually scare the birds away. But as other inventors have discovered, notably Michelangelo, people are heavier than birds, and wings don't really work. So they discovered that when they jumped off a hill. So they have to go to plan B, and they're thinking about a suitable alternative, but something that could also use wings in the air. So they decided to use hats at some point, and those definitely flew away. And then they decided to put paper onto a structure and to add a string to it. And that invention of kites proved to be definitely effective in getting those birds to be shooed away. So if you had a little bit of noise and noisemakers, that can also be effective. And eventually the adults notice that the kids have come up with something, so they decide to encourage them to keep innovating. And this is where the artist Yang really pushes the envelope and creates a whole menagerie of colorful kites, true to the traditional ones that he probably hadn't seen growing up. So it becomes a cottage industry. And reviewers from School Library Journal to Kirkus to Publishers Weekly to ALA Booklist have really embraced this series and have praised it for its ability to combine not only a child's natural curiosity, but their capability of creating things and making sense of their world. So again, author's note about the history of kites and how to make your own kite. And then the Chinese translations of those. All right, so we're going to stop this one. We're going to go to the fourth book of the series, which is the story of paper. So here they are then, and paper is pretty appropriate because, of course, that's how books are made. And we have a book papyrus print for the paper stock here. So kids definitely identify with this story as well, because the three brothers, the Chang brothers, are in school, and because sometimes they're not behaving, the teacher frowns upon that, and it's an experience that all kids can identify with. And you know, they're more interested in things like crawling on the ground than necessarily doing what the teacher says. But because of that, the teacher, he's kind of old school. He gives them a little hand wrapping, and he sends them home with extra work to do. So as you can tell, the kids are not very happy about getting punished. And they don't want their parents to know about that, so they try to hide the kind of disapproving note that the teacher has written on each of their hands. So they wanted to figure out, well, maybe they could have the teacher write on something else and not their hands. And it's about time that teachers and students both figure out how to write on something. So with a little bit of cajoling with the parents, they decide to put some material together and create handmade paper. So back in traditional China, paper was one of the 4 great inventions, along with some other things like the compass and gunpowder. And so in printing, so making paper from rice was one of the ways that it was actually invented in ancient China. So they smush it up, they dry it, and they whirl it around just like someone might be churning butter. And eventually they're able to put it onto a screen, and that material can dry in the air, and they figured out how to make paper, which is kind of amazing for kids because they take certain things for granted, like adults do too. So again, the community out there is happy about this new invention, and so are teachers too. So again, an author's note about the invention of paper, as well as how you can make your own paper. And if you haven't tried it before, it takes a little bit of practice, but it's definitely rewarding. You can kind of collapse a couple millennia of human inventiveness back into an afternoon and realize that people definitely have the capacity to create these things that have become truly valuable and depended upon. So with this 4-book series of amazing Chinese inventions, we were able to create a sort of modern version, which is not only bilingual, but is true to the spirit of the actual subject matter. All right, so lastly, we're going to go to the 5th book that Ying Compestine had written, which we published at the same time, and it's called Boy Dumplings. So it's a different artist, James Yamasaki. He actually is on the peninsula in the Bay Area, and he actually redrew the cover for us, as we also added the bilingual translation. So it's a totally different story, but it's one that also explores kind of Chinese cultural memory. It's set in a period where it's sort of like a Halloween, where instead of going trick-or-treating, people put out food offerings for wandering spirits, maybe their ancestors. So when the wandering spirits come by, they have something to eat and don't go away hungry and dissatisfied. So with that backdrop, we explore this kind of tongue-in-cheek adventure of how a wandering spirit doesn't really get satisfied because he doesn't get an offering, and he happens upon a boy who's very plump and could be a tempting snack for a hungry ghost. So this is the jacket flap. This is the ingredients for the recipe: a hungry ghost, a tasty looking boy, and you mix them together for a barrel of fun. So we created a new frontispiece of dumplings, which are definitely popular for any age. And here's the wandering spirit. So in this case, we put English on one end and the Chinese on another, just to be harmonious with the spread that the artist James Yamasaki created. So this wandering spirit, he looks a little scary, but he's kind of prone to being a little bit gullible. So he didn't get his offering, so he's still hungry and he's wandering around, and he happens upon this boy who definitely looks like he can make somebody very, very satisfied. So there are little elements of macabre humor, but overcoming that, it's really kind of a tongue-in-cheek adventure. So the boy, he's scared out of his pants in the beginning, but he gathers his wits and he realizes that maybe he can put one over on this old ghost. So as opposed to being fast food, he convinces the ghost to make put a little bit more elbow grease into it and make a recipe which would be definitely worth his while. And of course, the ghost, being a little bit too greedy, agrees. And so the boy gives them this really complicated recipe, something that this stay-at-home cook would realize is a little bit beyond them, but this ghost is pretty ambitious. And so we actually added a spread to the story as we realized that by adding the Chinese to the book, we didn't want to cram it all in and make it look very crowded. So James Yamasaki was very obliging. He created a brand new spread so we could smooth out the text more evenly. This is one of his spreads, which is like a maze, which definitely gives the reader a lot to look for, just like the ghost is looking for these ingredients. So he comes back, and again, the boy is not satisfied because the ghost has to do things in a particular order, which the ghost is not privy to. So he has to go back and get some more stuff. If you're familiar with the types of steamers that you might see at a Chinese restaurant, these are definitely industrial size because he wants to make a lot of dumplings, so he doesn't have to do this again. Of course, he needs to wash his ingredients very good, get all the dirt out. And this is actually the new spread that James made. The boy, again, doesn't want to go down without a fight, so he makes the ghost go through a couple more paces. He's all ready, and then, of course, the boy says, "Stop. There's still more stuff for you to do." And at this point, the ghost is getting a little exasperated. So he goes out and he does another errand, and he's really had it. So you can tell he's gone into overtime. But the boy realizes this, and of course, he plays his ace in the hole. He's taken so much time that it's no longer night, and then it's become day. And so the ghost, not quite a vampire, but he doesn't like the sun, and so he needs to find some place to hide. And the boy has kind of put him between a rock and a hard place. So he ends up going into this lantern, and the boy's family comes back and realizes that together they're able to enjoy this rooster lantern now, which is filled with the ghost, and they're actually eating a huge feast in honor of all that, and they cooked up 1,000 dumplings, which didn't have a boy in them. So with that ending, there's the author's note, and because again she is a noted cook who often goes on cruises to teach tourists how to cook, she creates a recipe for her dumplings, and that was her son back in the day who inspired the story because he had chubby cheeks. So those are the 5 books that we've published with Ying Compestine. This is actually the wraparound cover with the ghost who wants to make a boy into dumplings, and we go back to the cover for that. All right, so I'm going to stop the screen share here. And again, if you guys have questions, please let our friends at Asian American Curriculum Project know. They've been staunch supporters of us since we started in 2005, and we've appreciated their efforts to distribute our books to schools and libraries and students and teachers because we found it important to improve the representation of Asian Americans in children's books. And this was definitely an exciting project for us. We had never done so many bilingual books at the same time. So it definitely was a production challenge, but it was definitely a creative reward for us because we were able to, at the time, double the amount of bilingual Chinese books that we were offering. And with that, it just kept our momentum growing, and as well as our commitment to bilingual education. So we'll be sharing another program about our other bilingual Chinese series, Tales from the Chinese Zodiac, and we look forward to meeting you guys in person and sharing our stories with you and your patrons. Thanks very much.